Well, new financial disclosure reports are fueling speculation that the 2024 GOP presidential primary is anything but decided. As reported by CNN this weekend, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is in command of a massive $100 million war chest for his upcoming re-election race. And though a re-election bid is all the Sunshine State's governor appears to be planning on the surface, he's continued to be chasing the national spotlight on hot-button culture war issues such as the so-called Don't Say Gay bill and parents' rights in education. They continue to raise suspicion that DeSantis' ambitions far exceed just another 4 years in Tallahassee.
DeSantis has also sought to motivate his base specifically around his public beef with the Walt Disney Corporation, having accused the company of abusing its cushy standing in local Florida politics to spread, quote, radical corporate wokeness. And all signs seem to suggest it's working. DeSantis was given a rock star's welcome at a UFC appearance he made in Jacksonville this Saturday. The governor remains steadily popular in his state, with recent St. Leo University polling showing 58% of Floridians approve of his job performance. A rising panel joins us now. Julia Manchester is a political reporter for The Hill, and Philip Wegman is a White House reporter for Real Clear Politics. Welcome to you both.
Good morning.
Morning.
So, Julia, a 58% is a pretty impressive approval rating in this era of just relentless partisan bickering. You can't get 58% of America to agree to anything. So the fact that DeSantis, despite absolutely participating in the culture war, he is not, gotten it to the where he only has, the diehard MAGA in his corner. He clearly has appeal well beyond that, which would serve him well if he sought any higher office. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think a lot of this comes back to Florida's economy throughout the coronavirus pandemic, or for most of it, with the exception of, April and May of 2020. We've seen Florida mostly open for the most part, and we've seen Ron DeSantis very much give localities in Florida the choice to stay open or closed. And we know that Florida's economy obviously depends very much on hospitality, travel, tourism. So a lot of cities and localities in Florida have stayed open, and that's helped the economy. We've seen Florida fare economically better than other states. So DeSantis definitely has that going for him. In terms of the culture wars, though, we'll have to see. I think a lot of voters, people who are being polled, they're giving their opinions for the most part based on the economy, or are making that assumption. And the economy in Florida has been doing very well. At the same time, though, we do see rent prices, the price of goods, like they are across the country, skyrocketing in Florida recently, and that's been a point of debate down in the Sunshine State. But DeSantis can definitely rely on a relatively strong economy. We don't really know how the culture wars will play for him, though. This seems like a much more of a base issue for him, and that leads us to the 2024 conversation. Where does that leave him? How does that boost him with Republican primary voters? I think we'll have to see.
Yeah, Phil, I want to ask you about that because, Disney is obviously I think it's the largest private employer or largest corporate employer or something in Florida. And DeSantis is picking a fight with them. I mean, so Disney's got this special provision in Florida. They've their 24,000 acres are carved out. They basically get to run it like their own little government. And because of it, they get special provisions. And DeSantis is now saying to them, because of their obviously them coming out saying that they're going to have half of all of their characters somehow representative of minority groups. And then, of course, we've got the so-called Don't Say Gay bill. What is it really called? It's the Parental Rights in Education bill. So he's got all of this kind of, that kind of focuses on that sexual conversation with kids up to the 3rd grade, I believe. So what do you think is going to happen with this being a big employer in the state? As Julia just mentioned, tourism and travel are big economy factors for Florida. So is he barking up the wrong tree? Is he picking the wrong fight right now with Disney? Or do you think that this is going to fuel his base even more and he's going to become even more popular?
Right. It depends on how you see this fight and what camp you sit in. If you are in the media or you're, left of center, I think that as you observe what Ron DeSantis is doing right now, your reaction is probably going to be similar to the way that he dealt with COVID. He's certainly positioning himself to win favor with the Republican base, with conservatives, not necessarily independents or folks who are left of center. And I think that while there were perhaps some independents who might have liked him on the COVID stuff, maybe they will eventually see this fight with Disney on, the culture war. Maybe they see that as going too far. I think that Julia was correct when she was, really prudent a second ago and said, we just don't know. But what we can see so far outside of national polling is we can look at that $100 million that he's got in his war chest. That's one of the best barometers that we've got. Where are people willing to put their cash? And I think the very first thing that big number suggests is that he's able to at least mount some kind of primary challenge against Donald Trump if that's the direction that he chooses to go. But I think the other thing that is overlooked but also just as important is that if DeSantis has some sort of White House ambitions, he realizes that it's going to be scorpions in a bottle down in Florida. Not only would he have to take on Trump, before that, in all likelihood, he would have to either compete against or convince two other folks to stay out of the race. And that's, Senator Scott and Senators Rubio. So I think that, time will tell, obviously. There are potential rivals in Florida. What I think this does say, though, is that for anyone who suggested that Ron DeSantis was just going to be a flash in the pan, that he was going to be, only part of the pandemic conversation, they were wrong. He continues to be a foil to the Biden White House, and certainly the base loves him, but we have to see whether or not other voting groups are going to appreciate his style.
Yeah, that's a good point. But he is showing, as I think you just pointed out, he's showing a good sense of the culture war and its importance, and not just COVID, but being against the wokeness, and honestly doing it almost more thoughtfully than I think than Trump has at some points. Obviously, he read the kind of COVID, vaccine mandate resistance better than the former president. But speaking of the former president, so DeSantis wasn't the only GOP frontrunner who pulled an enthusiastic crowd this weekend. President Trump held a rally in North Carolina where he teased rally-goers with another presidential run. Let's watch.
And now we may have to do it again. Is there anybody here who would like to see me run again? Put that here, I'll remember.
Oh, boy, who's the bigger rock star, Trump or DeSantis?
That's a good question. Well, and that came, though, just after the former president made a surprise endorsement of Dr. Oz for Pennsylvania's Senate race, sending shockwaves across Trump world. And I saw a lot of criticism of this, actually, from pretty right-wing, pretty Trump-loyal people, not happy with the Dr. Oz endorsement. Dr. Oz, I think, is seen by a lot of these figures as not a sufficiently committed not sufficiently committed to anything, right? He's a celebrity doctor. Julia, what are you seeing in how this is shaking out and the fallout from this endorsement from, Trump-aligned forces?
Yeah, what's interesting about this endorsement is Trump and Dr. Oz share that in common. Previously being celebrities before they jumped into, particularly in television, before they jumped into politics. So I think, part of President Trump's endorsement, he could revolved around the fact that, he had a lot in common with Dr. Oz when it came to their backgrounds and, building a television reality show-esque empire and then jumping into politics. But yeah, it definitely splits the GOP field, and obviously some of Trump world, with some Trump loyalists obviously not being happy with this endorsement. But we're going to continue to see this play out through other primaries in the Senate if President Trump decides to endorse. In Ohio, for example, they're having a primary in just a few weeks in their Senate GOP race. He has yet to endorse there, but we are seeing a competition really evolve in that primary for his endorsement and his backing. So we're going to see this really play out, I think, in a number of races going forward, and it's going to be a test of President Trump's endorsement. If Oz does not win the primary, or if whoever he endorses in other Senate races, if that candidate doesn't win the primary, there's going to be serious questions about President Trump's political brand and really his staying power within the Republican Party 2 years after he left office.
Yeah, I mean, Philip, what do you think? Do you think that Trump, he, of course, in front of a crowd that's coming out to see him, they're going to cheer. Yeah, come, yeah. But what do you think the general sentiment is in the Republican Party amongst the voters? Do you think they would welcome him back with cheering open arms?
I think that obviously you've got Trump endorsing Oz, and it makes sense for all of the reasons that Julia just mentioned. It also doesn't make sense when you take a closer look at the policy positions that he took during his medical daytime talk show, whether it was on, the life issue, whether it was on LGBTQ issues. There are a number of areas where Oz is very much outside of the conservative mainstream. Trump seems to have looked past that and instead seen an outsider like himself, and that's why he endorsed. We'll see if that works out. Obviously, Trump has been unhappy with some of the candidates that he's endorsed recently. I mean, he polled his support for Representative Mo Brooks down there in Alabama. And I think that what we'll see is he'll have a scorecard going into, the 2024 midterms. People will be able to look at the candidates that he supported and say, look, does this guy know how to, find a winner? Does he have, the party's best interest at heart or his own? But, something that I was thinking about with the recent confirmation of Justice Jackson recently is if you talk to Republicans on Capitol Hill and maybe you get them in private or, you have a candid conversation with them, they'll tell you that they believe that it was Trump who lost Republicans in the Senate. In fact, Chris Christie said this on the record at the beginning of the Biden administration when he was talking about how if Trump had been more focused on, Senators Loeffler and Perdue rather than on the previous presidential election, then those guys probably would have been elected. Then, Build Back Better is no longer part of the conversation. Then it's not the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Then it's also not, these Supreme Court confirmations that we just saw. So he's got a mixed record on this. The people who are in politics because they love Trump, I don't think that's ever going to change. But, we might see the emergence of voters who say to themselves, I've got my favorites, but ultimately the person that I'm going to pull the lever for is the person who I think can most reliably beat Joe Biden. And, if they see these losses stack up in Trump's corner, that might change things.
Yeah, absolutely. Julia, Philip, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll be back with more Rising right after this.